Welcome back, listeners, to That's a Good Card. Today, Ya will have the challenge of getting me to say, that's a good card. While Ya will be doing the convincing, I'll be playing the devil's advocate. If you're interested in more Tag C content, check out our Patreon in the link down below. Also, now's a good time to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you're listening to us on YouTube. And please leave a comment below with your thoughts on today's topic, as well as a suggestion for our next card. All right, Ya, let's get started. What kind of spice have you brought to us today?
Today's spice comes to us from, again, a Manila Midget. We played with him a couple weeks back, and he made some really good recommendations. And I actually have tried this card out. Kyle got to see it played firsthand. The card I'm talking about is Mirrormade. It is one generic and then 2 blue pips, an enchantment. It reads, you may have Mirrormade enter as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. The flavor text says, share your darkest secret and the mirror will reveal your soul's essence. Siri, Royal Mirror Keeper. This card is currently seeing play in 64 decks. Decks such as Kinnan, Malcolm Vile, which is my deck, Zur the Enchanter, and then I think most prominently it is played, sees play in Tameshi. It actually made a recent top 4 in Nastrom's list, probably one of the premier Tameshi pilots at the from the Vault tournament at the end of last year. And so it's definitely a card that's seeing some spice, and I'm bringing it up because a card that is similar to this is... Actually, let's get into our points, and I'll get into it. But yeah, that's the card.
Just to kind of touch on where we're seeing this card as well is, I think, like you said, Nastrom's list has a pretty big influence on our pod as well. Our personal pod plays, we have at least one pilot who plays Tameshi, and I think that Mirrormade has kind of bled into some other lists seen in our pod. So including Kinnan, like you said, and mentioned that we've seen play for that list as well. I've also seen this in the wild, just playing in generic blue farm lists. I think that it is kind of like flavor of the monthy right now, I would say. I'll kind of get into my downsides for it because I don't want to lead into it as being flavor of the month being necessarily a bad thing. But sometimes historically, cards that have become flavor of the months, it generally means that it might phase out. So, but let's get into your positives first before we kind of dig into any sort of downsides. Let's get you selling me on this card. I'm ready.
Part of the reason I think it's flavor of the month is because of the flavor of the meta right now, which is just mid-range hell. And so the first positive, which is not necessarily a positive per se, is like, hey, I think mid-range hell is here to stay. And this is a card that's going to let you hopefully outvalue your opponents, right? Like if you're in a blue pod, everybody's running a Rhystic Study. Everybody's running a Mystic Remora. Those 2 cards are certain. Chances are they're also on the One Ring. And so this really allows you to not only play your own Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, and your One Ring, but to also potentially get a copy of it. So the first point here is like mid-range hell is here to stay, and so now you've got to get...
I mean, let's talk about that, because I think it's something that a lot of people have mused upon post-ban, is the thought, at least a lot of people thought that, quote, Rogsai wasn't affected as much by the bans. So therefore, we would be seeing more Rogsai, and the meta actually might speed up. What we've seen now, I mean, it's been months, and I feel like Rogsai has kind of fallen off quite a bit. I think there's more people leaning into the mid-range who have probably tried for the past few months to jam Rogsai and get wins, and are just feeling like they're being stopped left, right, and center by a bunch of mid-range decks at the table who have access to free interaction. So it's just weird that I feel like I'm hearing this perception from content creators and grinders and just other tournament players in general that they're like, okay, well, I guess if you can't beat them, guess we're joining them. I guess everything is mid-range. I guess everything is going to go to time. Is that something that you've kind of felt as well? Or do you think that the meta still might speed up? Or are we still in like this unexplored territory?
I think we're still unexplored, right? And I think that people are defaulting to this right now.
Great way to put it. It's just defaulting.
It's defaulting, right? I did a tournament towards the late in the end of last year, and there were still wins that, not all of my games went to time. Like a lot of my later games, as people got more tired, went to time and were really mid-rangey. But, I lost to a Dahada list. I lost to a really quick Sisse, and then like even an Urza list.
So what's your descriptor of quick? Are we talking turn 2, or are we talking like 3,
turn
4,
2,
5,
turn 3,
which is just
turn
like
2, turn 3.
Play?
Right, like
turn
high
2,
face.
Turn 3. Interesting.
Yeah, turn 2, turn 3.
I don't think I have. I've been playing a lot of CEDH. I do not think I have lost turn 2 since the bans. I really don't. I have not. I have won on turn 2 once playing Corvold, but I have never lost on turn 2 since then, which is really weird.
I think
maybe
it's
just
rarer.
PNW meta. I think it's just PNW meta as well.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much control, it's just so much harder to win on turn 2 when people are mulliganing for mind break traps and such.
No, I agree. And that's why I think that it's kind of staying here. And so I think people are starting to look at different ways to outvalue or to get more value than these other lists, right? And so my second point, right, is that I kind of personally like this over Steel Enchantment, which is a card that we're seeing pretty commonly in Blue Farm, in Rogsai, in your Sisse list. Like,
okay, hold on. There's no way you're seeing it in Rogsai, but continue with the other ones. The other ones make sense. There's no way.
I think maybe I was just looking at a bunch of lists and I was clicking through a couple lists. So yeah, you're probably right there. But a lot of these other ones are
control based. Sure.
Yeah. These are lists that are running Steel Enchantment, which is one mana cost less. I think it's just one generic mana cost less. I think it's a blue and a blue.
Yep. I mean, we did an episode on Steel Enchantment, so
I can't remember.
I'll link that in the description down below. Yeah, it's 2 blue pips.
2 blue pips
for an enchantment.
That's right.
That reads take control of target opponent's enchantment.
And what I think I don't like about Steel Enchantment, for me as a player, right here it is. I think that the Steel Enchantment might be the quote unquote better card, but I think that for me as a player, I don't want to in politics, I don't want to leave any feels bads, right? Stealing somebody's like fish or their heuristic study can lead to you having a little bit less say. And like, yes, CEDH players are like, like that's the game, like they like blah, blah, blah. But like, I think at the end of the day, you will still leave that person when you steal their heuristic study. That leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And they're going to remember that later on when you're trying to politic, or just talk to the table. And like, now they're like, well, nope, I'm not going to do anything. You're the one with the heuristic study. That was my heuristic study. And so
it is quite salt-inducing.
Right.
I've definitely seen situations where players will do that. They'll be like, well, or they'll yap every round and be like, well, I could have done something if I had a heuristic study, but somebody had to take my heuristic study. I get that. Like, I think that people, at the end of the day, people are people, and emotions are a big part of the game that we play.
So I like that this leaves a little bit of like the low-key feels good, right? Like, hey, you get yours and I'm going to just copy yours, right? Like it's coming in as a copy of a Smothering Tithe, a copy of a heuristic study. You still get yours.
And when this card was brought to us originally, I think part of the politicking and part of the reason Sean really likes this card is because he felt like people wouldn't fight over it. Like they did Steel Enchantment, right? I think that's the bigger piece of politicking here is that Mirrormade doesn't necessarily... It just says, hey, let me join the fun, right? You might even be able to politic and be like, we're on the same team, right? Like, ha ha ha, to the other mid-range, player, and they might be like, oh, okay, the vibes are good, sure, I won't waste this force of will on Mirrormade. I guess I'll let them have a heuristic study. Not thinking to themselves like, oh... this person is now going to become the number one threat at the table besides myself. So I think that there is room for that where it doesn't have that theft effect to it. So people won't want to fight over it because the difference between it and Steel Enchantment, is like, oh, I lose something if I don't stop this versus, oh, I don't necessarily lose anything if I don't stop this. So I guess I'm just going to hold off. And that's what Sean said was the most, like, the biggest draw to this card in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I just, again, I used it last night and I used it to copy somebody's Mystic Remora. And like they didn't fight me over it. They're like, yeah, sure, that's fine, right? Like it just happened, and now I had a Mystic Remora.
Especially with Mystic Remora specifically, because I think people will be like, "Oh, you're paying 3 for a fish, okay?"
Right?
You know. Yep.
Fun fact: I not only paid the 3 for my fish, but I also then paid the fish cost because I just knew I wasn't going to do anything else that turn.
Oh, that was that turn. I remember
that was that turn.
You
right?
had so much mana. You had so much colorless mana. You had Ancient Tomb and City of Traders out.
Right.
I remember this now.
Yeah. So I paid 7 for a fish. Right.
For a fish.
To be a responsible player.
Wow.
That was just my fun fact. I ended up winning that game.
Yeah, you
I
won
ended
that game.
up winning that game.
Anecdotal evidence. Pay
right?
7 for a Mirrormade to get a fish. Win game. It's easy, folks.
Because I paid the upkeep cost for that for a while.
Oh yeah, you could, but you had so much mana. What happens when you have you had a Soul Ring too, or something like that, and a Chrome Mox. You just were so developed on your mana.
I was pretty developed on my mana, and then I had Malcolm out with Kedis, so I was making more mana each turn. So yeah, it was a pretty good spot to be. And I think the last point I have for this card is that what I like about this is that you get a choice, right? Like Steel Enchantment or any of these other kind of effects kind of a target other enchantments, whereas Mirrormade lets you choose an artifact if you want, right? I mentioned the One Ring before. I think it's a really good choice. I think that we actually saw this card twice last night because it was also in our friend's Kinnan list, and Kinnan also played out a Mirrormade to copy my fish, I think, or his fish.
No, it was I think it was his own fish.
Yeah, it was his. It was my Mirrormade.
It might have been his own fish. Yeah, he got a fish. I remember that.
Yeah. I just like that it gives you options to copy. Even mana rocks if you really needed to in a pinch for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Kyle?
Oh, I think that's what you mentioned just now is a pretty big draw as well. Is unlike Steel Enchantment where you have to target something an opponent controls. This card is a little more flexible where you can kind of just double up on things that you already have. So I kind of like that idea where you're like, oh, I have a Rhystic Study. Now I have 2 Rhystic Studies. Neat.
Right.
So, I mean, that is it's not nothing. So it's a little stronger to have something that you can have more agency over, right? You can double Smothering Tithe. You can double any of that stuff that we mentioned if you have it yourself and put yourself in a really, really high percentage chance of winning the game, or the driver's seat, as we like to call it.
Notably, before the listeners comment, we know that we can't copy our own One Ring because it is legendary. We recognize that.
That's true.
We're not saying you can copy your own One Ring, but you can copy somebody else's One Ring.
What if you have a card that says ignore the legend rule? That's probably printed somewhere. Commenters, please put that down below and protect me from sounding stupid.
And actually, a fun thing that you just made me think about is that there is a chance you want to copy. Let's say you got a One Ring out turn 1, and it's been doing work, but it's also doing you a lot of damage. There's a world where you want to copy your own One Ring, and when the legend rule comes on the stack, you you get rid of the original and you keep this new one. Now you have protection. It does come with protection, right? I think that is important to note because if you're
super low HP and then you don't die and kill yourself.
You don't die? Huge. It definitely has come up. I have definitely had to bounce my own One Ring before. It is important.
And you know what? Before the commenters are commenting right now. You could just be playing this in Kark Sakashima or some sort of Sakashima deck, because Sakashima reads the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. Right. So that is a relevant CEDH card. So obviously, I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong.
But I'm trying to save myself.
But yeah, those are my upsides.
No more? That's it?
That's
just
it.
3, not even a fun one?
I think my fun one is I won with it, so that's a first time I can say that with one of these cards I brought, right? I know in my heart of hearts, this card...
Point 4, I won with this card, get good noobs.
Get good noobs. Good. I brought a card that is not... There's no way that Kyle can tell me this is the worst card I've ever brought. That belongs to Barb Servitor
Whoa, put some respect on Barb Servitor's
I love
name.
Barb Servitor. I've tried to make it work.
I'm still waiting for somebody to play it and play Blasphemous Act and deal 13 damage to somebody.
Ooh, hot.
I'm still waiting for that day. Will it happen? Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe so. You know what? You know,
What's that?
But, just saying, Delny exists.
Delny
Anything's
exists.
going to break Barb Servitor. It's Delny, okay? Our best friend.
Probably one of our best cards we've brought.
Yeah, I was thinking
I'm
about
proud about that card.
the other day. We're gonna take a big tangent right now.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's the best card we've ever brought on the pod? Because
It's not the most popular. It's not the most popular, right? Because
what is the most popular?
Based off of views. Based off of views.
Oh, the views. No. We're talking about views. Okay. We're talking about how like the best card in CEDH, like the most popular card in CEDH decks. Because like my heart says that I think the best card to this day, and this is super biased, by the way, is LQR, Legolas's Quick Reflexes.
Ooh.
I think that card is so freaking good.
Yeah, you love that card.
It's
you
incredible.
love that card.
I love
Surge
that
Foil,
card.
loves.
Split Second is just broken. Not only do I have one Surge Foil, but I have two Surge Foils because I accidentally bought a Surge Foil.
I thought you got rid of that.
Late at night. No, I still have it. I thought I was going to sell it to somebody, but then the other person, they backed out. So I bought a Surge Foil late at night. I was like, I'm just going to get this card. Forgot about it. Forgot that it was on the way to me. And then I was like, shoot, I have to play it with some friends. I need something. I called my local LGS. They had a Surge Foil. I went and picked it up. This was like 4 or 5 days later. I had completely forgotten that I had bought one. So then now I have two Surge Foil LQRs. But anyway, I digress. I think that LQR is the best card we've ever got. But who knows? Maybe it's Mirrormade. Probably not after I dig into this thing, but
I kind of feel like it probably is. I think Downey is up there. I think Downey's up there.
No, I think it could be Downey. Yeah, for sure. Did you know that we're almost at 52 episodes?
Oh, a full year. Almost
Which
there.
would be a full year. So listeners,
if you're
hearing
listening,
this now, make sure that you listen to the next episode. I don't know what we're going to do. It's probably just going to be a big thank you. Maybe I'll do a video. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But we're almost there.
We're almost there.
Close.
We have been consistently posting an episode a week, which some people didn't think we would do. I think us included.
I was gonna say I didn't. Oh, you know what card I just realized we did? This is super
tangent.
Sorry.
We're on
My
way
brain
off the rails. We're way off now.
Unlocked. It's got to be Talon Gates of Madara, right?
Ooh, that card's
such
so
a
good.
banger. Or 6. Oh shoot, I forgot about that one too.
Maybe we should do
That was
that.
a
Maybe we
really
should
good
recap
one.
that, listeners.
No, that sounds like Patreon content. That sounds like Patreon content to me. Yeah, that sounds like Patreon content.
And you can sign up to
so
be
listeners,
one.
sign up to be a patron. To be a patron. I always say that. Sign up to be a Patreon. That doesn't make any sense. It's patron, right?
Patron. That's what I think.
Patreon.
Patron.
Anyway, super big tangent, but we're going to go into the downsides now. And to be honest, I'm kind of stepping up to the plate with this one, y'all. Because I think that this card is seeing success. So I think people are just going to write it off and be like, yeah, it's good. Obviously, Nation plays it in his top 4 list. Like, it's obviously good. Why are you even talking about this? It's not fringe. It's just good.
I can definitely think of downsides to this card.
I'm going to try my best. So, well, you can rip into it with me because I think this is something, you know what? I'll just get into this as one of my first points. I think this is kind of a bait card to many new CEDH players specifically. Here's what I'll say. The downside is that this card, I can see it being slotted into lists that are not control lists. This is a control card. And in my deck building sense, I believe this to be a pure control card. And you could argue this with me. That's fine. But I think sometimes when it comes to flavor of the month cards like this one, people forget about the fundamentals of deck building and the fundamentals of playing Magic the Gathering. Tempo exists in CEDH, right? And sometimes you are not playing a deck that can afford to lose tempo like you did in your example earlier, where you're paying a high mana cost for a card that generally isn't that much. You're overpaying for an ability that you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it a powerful ability? Sure. But in doing so, you're unable to develop other pieces of your board, right? So tempo, when I think about tempo, and I guess I've talked about this a lot, but I think if you look up like the fundamental definition of tempo, I'm going to do that. I'm going to read the fundamental definition. I'll kind of talk about how I view it slightly differently. Let's see.
2025, new era. Look at us.
New era, yeah.
New
okay,
era.
so when I look up the definition of tempo in Magic the Gathering, it says tempo is a term to describe the pace at which one plays threats. Some people would consider tempo as one of the fundamental components of Magic. Okay, that was just from the wiki. But I don't necessarily agree that it's just like threats. I guess you can argue anything that you play as a threat. Like you play a basic land and that's a threat to your opponent because now you have mana. But
I don't know that.
But I don't. Yeah, but I don't consider it necessarily to be threats because I think it's because when I think of tempo, I think of the efficiency of utilizing the cards that you have and the efficiency that your deck has in terms of being able to get you and gain you value with pace. So I do agree that it is a pacing thing because it's like, okay, on what turn are you able to establish X amount of benefit? And are you doing that in an efficient way is kind of how I view it. And I think that lists that are turbo or mid-range will sometimes fall too deep into a card like this, where you may be overpaying or overspending for something that you don't necessarily need or that it isn't in the game plan or path of your lists. And let me tell you why I'm specifically talking about tempo here and not necessarily just pure mana value, is because Mirrormade is very difficult to cast, being 1 and 2 blue pips, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not going to be able to establish this early. One, you have to be relying on someone else having something or you also developing something, but that's not going to be as super consistent. So are you really playing Mirrormade on turn 1? No. Are you playing Mirrormade on turn 2? Maybe. More likely you're playing Mirrormade. I think you played on turn 3. I think you played on turn 3. Yeah, you had 3 lands. Yeah. So most likely you're probably going to be playing this on turn 3. And at turn 3, if you are paying excess mana for something that would normally cost you 1 mana, it feels like a bad tempo play. And like in a mid-range list, in a turbo list, either of these, right? And basically the argument I'm making is like these should not play this. Developing your board in these turns matters a lot. And you could say, well, it's CEDH. You don't have to develop your board anymore. You just play Thassa's Demonic, win the game. That's not necessarily true, right? You have to be able to develop pieces to get you to your win line. Pieces where you can pressure your opponents in some capacity or threaten them in some capacity. Like, cool. Getting 15 cards in your hand is super cool. Sure, I'm going to take this Mystic or more on turn 3. I'll get 15 cards in my hand. Awesome. But you spent all your mana to do this thing. Now you have all these cards in your hand and you're untapping on your turn 4 with like 3 mana and like nothing on your board. Like, what are you trying to do at that point? Are you just hoping that you've now drawn into development pieces and then now you can develop, like you can catch up from the board state? Maybe. But it just feels like you're sinking a ton of resources into something that may not be what your deck wants to do to win the game. And let's think of some development pieces that you can do earlier on in those turbo or mid-range lists. I'm thinking stuff like Burgi, right? Like getting a Burgi out, getting a Wishclaw Talisman out, like getting a freaking Artist Talent out, a DRC out instead of these things. When you're able to get things out earlier...
So are you saying that those are better than playing a Rhystic Study?
Well, it depends. It depends. So sometimes, yes. I'm saying this specifically for a turbo or a faster mid-range list. Let's use Blue Farm that's running Nas. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I 100% agree. I really do think that. Because I think that if you start devolving your game plan into something that your deck is not trying to do, like, what are you doing? Why are you playing the deck? If you truly are just like, you know what, I'm just going to hope I can play a Rhystic Study and chill and vibe, why are you playing Rogsai? That's how I see it.
Oh, no, I agree. Totally, for sure, agree. Because I think you're, like, the way you're putting this makes me think that you're really focusing on, like, doing this on a fish, which I think is inefficient.
Oh, I am. I am focusing on that.
Right, but for the same cost, like, you know, I think more often than not, at least in tournaments I play, I see, like, a turn 1, turn 2 Rhystic pretty often. And so, in my head, like, fish is the floor, right? Fish is the floor. And then most likely, though, I'm potentially waiting for I think that this is a great point, like that you do wait and like you probably don't play this right away. You're waiting and you're waiting. You're developing other pieces while you wait to pay this.
So like, okay, let's take your example. Let's use heuristic study as a mana neutral situation. Yeah. If you're on the play,
yep,
as a fast list,
yep,
right, and you have the option of developing a Burgie versus playing a Mirrormade. So let's say this is a very real example. You're turn 2 on the play. You're playing a fast turbo list, whether it's Grixis Pirates or Roxai, doesn't matter. Are you playing a Mirrormade and copying your opponent's heuristic study, or are you playing a Burgie?
For me,
yeah,
in my Malcolm Vial Smasher list,
sure,
probably the Mirrormade for me.
Do you play a more turbo list?
No, I mean,
you don't.
Okay. As turbo as my list is, my list could win turn 2 because
exactly.
I still play.
See, and I kind of disagree with that. No offense, y'all, but
I can win.
When I think of Malcolm Vial Smasher, I'm thinking you should be trying to win early. If you're not trying to win early, I don't know. I'd be playing that list, and you know, all the people in the comments are gonna correct me. Whatever, say whatever. You can play this. You can.
I can win, right? I can win that way. Yeah, for sure.
The point I'm trying to make, just going back to it, because maybe I'm just ranting too long, is that if you are playing a deck that is trying to win fast, this card will not help you win fast.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
It.
Yeah, for sure.
Things that you would want to play instead are things that would, you know, bolster your ability to win faster. That's all.
No, for sure. And I don't think that any of the lists I've looked at this in was that fast, right? I would like to win on turn 3.
I mean, I'll tell you what, yeah, I don't think you should be running it in Malcolm Vial for that exact reason.
I probably shouldn't be, but I slotted it in just because I was running. What did I replace it with? I replaced it with something else. You're just
trying to go fast. So if you're trying to go fast, like I don't know if you should be just like settling for the mid-range game. And that's what I'm worried about. So what you just did is what I'm worried that other people, especially newer players of CEDH, will do. You might just, and I don't know if you were just trying to test the card for the pod or what, but I just like don't think that you should default be like, oh, people played this and were successful. This belongs in my deck. That's not how you should be building your list.
I mean, that's the case for any of the cards we bring, though, right? Like, that's all any of the cards we bring, right? Like, minus lands, maybe. I think there's a strong case for, like, Talon Gates is possibly, like, you could run it in most lists. But anyways, we're a little bit off.
We're off the rails.
But no, I agree with you. I agree with you at this point. Like, in a turbo deck, this is probably not the card for you. Those 2 blue pips are killer.
They are. Yeah, for sure. And like that's low-hanging fruit. I guess I'll put that as my third point now. Or my second point.
Second point. That was your second point.
My second point. Is that the 2 blue pips are really difficult to cast. Anyone who has played a 5-color list especially understands how difficult that is. Obviously, it's still difficult in 4-color lists, but man, is it hard.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sometimes you're sitting there with demonic fastest in your hand and you're like, shit, I don't have 2 blue pips.
Right. Right.
You're like, I can't even cast this if I wanted to. Like, what is going on? Like, I don't have it. That is the worst feeling ever. But even though we do have, you know, pretty much access to perfect land bases, if you think about it, in CEDH, we're all playing the best land bases possible. We have all the dual lands. We have all the fetch lands. Like, we shouldn't have an issue getting access to colors. But I think double blue is probably the hardest thing to get access to, just because we don't have a blue dork.
It always feels like it.
Well, yeah. The hierarch, okay, technically the one hierarch, but we don't really have like I don't know, we don't have a Llanowar Elf in blue, that'd be broken, but we don't have that. That's why it's so difficult to get that 1 extra blue pip, especially early on. The only really option you have to get it early on is if you get really lucky with a Mopal or a Chromox, right?
Chromox, yeah.
I guess a Mox Diamond too.
That's how I got it, yeah.
Yeah, there's no blue spirit guide. Everybody jokes about it every single time. Like, I wish I had a blue spirit guide so I can cast this Swan Song. You know, that's not a thing. So it's just the hardest pip to get access to in CEDH. So I think that 2 blue pips is tough, right?
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
And then my last point is that this is a better CEDH card or tournament CEDH card than it is CEDH card. And this is 1,000,000,000% based off of what your opponents are playing.
Yes.
If you are not playing against lists that are blue running Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora specifically, don't play this card.
You're praying for a Smothering Tide and you're praying for a One Ring.
Yeah, exactly. But even then, like if you're pulling up to your weekly CEDH pod with your friends and it's like Ob Nixilis and like, I don't know, Corvold and like one other thing that doesn't really play blue, maybe like a Nihilist. You're playing against Rocco? I don't know. Like, don't play this card. Like you are gonna get so much more of a benefit playing this card into blue farm specifically. Like if you're running Mystic, Rhystic, Smothering Tithe, Necropotence, like those are the One Ring, right? Those are the ones that you're trying to hit. If you're playing against people who are in mono green, don't play this card, right? What are you gonna take for them? You want their Sylvan Library?
Carpet of Flowers.
You want their Carpet of Flowers? It's really difficult. And I'll use this anecdotally speaking. What's really funny about this point specifically is we actually, both of us just joined that the Howling Salt Mine CEDH League.
Yeah.
Which would be my first online league. I'm excited. I have a little bit of reservations solely because my deck shuffles a lot. So I'm a little like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to shuffle and then make piles over and over again. But, I'll manage.
It is a thing. It's a thing.
But the point I was trying to make is that in this league, I'm pretty sure there's like 0 blue farm lists, like 0 Rogside lists, like 1 TNT list. Yeah, go look.
What?
Like people who play CEDH in a non-tournament setting don't want to play that shit. Like they want to play cool stuff. They want to play Glarb. They want to play Corvold. They want to play all the stuff that they feel like isn't quite good enough to play in a wide field, tournament CEDH event. They just want to play fun stuff. And if you're playing against people who are just playing fun stuff for CEDH, like CEDH level stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's fun CEDH level stuff.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want this card. It's just not what you want. Unless you're like, I don't know, maybe would I want this against Zuladoc? Probably. Shout out Connor. If Connor, the Zuladoc pilot, is listening to this pod, comment whether or not you're afraid of this card. But anyway, just be vigilant rather on when you're slotting this card in, if it really makes sense for the people that you're playing against.
Agree. I completely agree.
So, cool. All right, that's my last point, y'all. What point of mine out of those 3 that I just made, and I'll reiterate them for you as well as the listeners. 1, this could bait people into playing this in non-control lists. 2 blue pips is a lot of blue pips. And 3, it's a better TCEDH card than regular CEDH. What point do you like the most?
For me, the tempo play, right? I think that...
Oh, good.
I think that's definitely the biggest, strongest point about this, right? There is a little bit to be said about like the cost of it, but I think that we've somewhat seen like steel enchantment effects like this kind of be played before, and they will kind of come and go, even though like Rhystic Study and Fish and Smothering Tithe will stay in the meta and like will just constantly be there. I think that there's a lot to be said about knowing what your deck wants to be doing and making sure you kind of stick to that, right? Rather than playing this card because you heard about it on this podcast, right? If like if you're listening here, like it's actually been really cool just listening to people tell us that we've kind of helped them change their mind or like re-look at CEDH or the way that they look at cards in general. And so if you're going to take anything from this podcast, like know how your deck is supposed to be played.
Yeah. This is a great time for me to mention this. Listeners, if you're listening to this podcast, we get a lot of comments of people being like, I absolutely love this card. This is one of my favorite pet cards. We don't really get a lot of comments, and they're not hate comments, but we don't get a lot of comments of people being like, you know what? This just isn't good enough for my list, and this is why. Please do. Comment that. If you don't think that if you don't agree that the card is good for your list or multiple lists or many people's lists, like, call out downsides. I am super down. I want our comment sections to be full of not only people being like, this is also another reason why this card is good, but I'm down for people to talk about the downsides for cards. Like, don't feel like every time we bring up a card for this podcast, like that you have to be convinced it's a good card. Like, the whole point of this podcast is to make sure that you are thinking about the cards that you're putting into your deck. You are testing them. Sure, test away, But at the end of the day, once you finish testing, you're making a conscious decision of whether or not it's good enough for your list, hopefully based on things that we talk about.
No, I completely agree. I think that one time a while ago, when we were still new, and something that I'm really kind of proud about is that when people look up that's a good card or look up the card that we're bringing, I really hope that they find our podcast. They scroll through the subreddit, the Reddit post, or the YouTube comments, and they get to read people will be like, I've never heard of this card, even though it was a good card at one point and was not played. So I don't know anything about this like classic card, right? But like, here's this podcast that not only talks about the positives and negatives, but like other people have chimed in like well after the fact, right? And like that stuff is really cool.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you're one of those listeners, please.
Our comment section is gold, especially like in the YouTube comments as well as the Reddit comments, especially for people pointing out like fringe benefits for cards. Like I said earlier, like people will talk about interactions that we didn't even think about. Like, we didn't even come close to thinking about during the podcast. Exactly. And that's awesome. Like that's what I love those comments. Those are my absolute favorite comments for people being like, this is also another reason that you guys missed on why it could be so good. Like that makes us better Magic players. I love it. Eat it up.
Yep.
Eat it. Cool.
All right, Kyle, what point of mind do you think best supports for why this card could be or should be included in somebody's list?
The most interesting point is the politics aspect of, if you're comparing this card specifically to Steel Enchantment, I think that it is a very easy politic. And I talk about this with some of my friends pretty consistently for tournament CEDH play and tournament yapping versus other yapping. Versus BSing your friends at the table and just being spiteful. But like for tournament yapping specifically, like you are going to be more successful like allying and being a friend to the person at the table than trying to tell the person what to do. So I think that this card can definitely be easily politic to be like, you get a Ristic, I get a Ristic, and then point to the turbo player at the table and go, he ain't getting through us. And then high five, you know what I mean? And then you hold hands and skip into the meadow as you go into a mid-range game that you may or may not be able to win. So good luck. Hope you have Consecrated Sphinx in your deck, but you know, that's the only way you're going to get through it. But that's kind of the best point that you made, and that's the point that Sean brought up when he told us about this card and why he thinks it's so good is if it's not going to eat a counterspell because you're able to politic and finesse your way into getting a Ristic Study or a Mystic Remora through your politicking abilities, awesome.
All the better.
Good on you.
All the better.
Right? All the better. Just like talking about, you know, that pod we just released last week, Artist Talent. One of the reasons we liked it so much is people saying like, hell no, that thing is not getting countered. People are not going to counter that card. We love it. That's how we inch value in this hellhole mid-range meta.
Please
that value, people.
Please.
Yeah, inch the value. It's super important. And that's another point. I'm just going to dig into it. Why tempo is so important too, because those early turns especially, that's where you're going to be inching out value that's going to stick on the board because people are afraid to use their counters yet. They haven't developed to have 3, 4, or 5 counters in their hand yet. So whatever you're establishing early with your tempo, whether it's a professional facebreaker, a Bergie, whatever, it has a higher likelihood of sticking at that time too. So don't forget to develop your board and make tempo plays to gain value early, because later on, it just gets harder and harder to stick value.
Thanks for that, Kyle. It's time. Did we get you to change your mind? Kyle, have you changed your thoughts on Mirrormade? Were you convinced, is this a good card?
Respectfully, no. I think that my thoughts haven't changed. My thoughts really haven't changed. I think that this card is misused too much for me to say that this is a good card. In a control list specifically, yes, this is a good card. If you're playing full control, yes. But other than that, no, I'm not sold. If your list has ad nauseum in your deck, don't play this card. You don't need it.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, for sure. Sure.
No, even for like a blue farm list. Because I know you're a stan of this card. So like if you're playing a blue farm list that's running ad nauseum, like a faster blue farm list, you're running ad nauseum, let's say, and necro, right? You're running both. All right, like, do you think you should be playing Mirrormade?
There's a huge caveat to all of this, by the way. The list that I think is best represents this card uses this card completely different than everything we've talked about, right? If you're
Tameshi?
Playing, Tameshi, like completely different. Oh, yeah. Like, yeah. Just a huge caveat.
I know
we probably should have mentioned this. Yes. We should have mentioned this way ahead.
Sure,
like, the way Kyle and I talking about it is very different. Like, this is for a, no offense, more normal deck, like a deck that wants to cast spells, right? Tameshi is not casting this thing. This thing is coming back in from the graveyard for free, essentially. Or no, not for free, but like
not you're bringing it back. It's kind of similar to like Like, I can be more convinced in this that this card could be played in a Zur list, even a faster Zur list, just because it's an enchantment, right? Same with Master Keys.
Yeah, Master Keys, yeah.
It has bonus synergy. But, like,
Right.
please, like, just use this as a PSA warning people. If you're just playing some random pile that has blue in it that's going fast, that doesn't have some sort of extra synergy with enchantments, don't get baited. Don't see your friend playing this card and go, oh, wow, he stole a Ristic Study. Like, I should do that too. I'm going to cut or copied, sure. My friend copied a Ristic Study. I want to do that too. That card seems so good. I'm going to cut Cabal Ritual for this card. Like, don't do stupid stuff like that. If you're trying to go fast and win games, like, don't do anything rash.
You just reminded me what I need to swap out. Actually, before Friday and Saturday. That's when I play my tournaments. Thanks.
What?
No, don't worry about it.
Are you cutting Cabal Ritual?
No. I actually need to cut this card. I was testing this card because it is in Bile Smasher right now. But I don't need it. I don't need it, especially before my tournament on Friday and then Saturday. Like, I have a couple games. So thank you.
Yep.
We had a lot to say about that card. Let's talk about another card.
We did have a lot to say. Oh, is it time for our favorite closing segment?
Yeah, it's time.
That's a good card, ? So, listeners, for those of you who haven't listened to our final closing segment, we'd like to end the podcast by having one of us read an obscure Magic card name to the other, and it's the other person's job to guess everything about that card. Just another note for you listeners, if you join the Patreon, you may be able to recommend to us in our super secret Patreon Discord channel a card to be featured on That's a Good Card ? So check out our Patreon if you would like to recommend a card to us. We've had the same person, the same wonderful patron, recommend a bunch of cards for us. So if you want to hop in here too and get in on the fun, do it. Do it. All right, y'all. Let's hear the card. What do we got?
Today's card comes to us from Oblivious Lemon on our Discord, also known as Doug's Dad, Bark Bark. He recommended to us a card for you to guess today, Raging River.
Raging River. Interesting. I'm feeling land. It's giving land. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe it's just like because I'm thinking
we've never guessed land.
Underground River is what I'm thinking of. So I'm going to go Raging River is a land which doesn't have a color identity, but it is bluish in the art.
Okay.
Because there's an obvious raging river. I'm thinking like the water is like a lot of blue, but it also is like a lot of white water, right? Because there's a lot of little rocks and big rocks inside there too. And the rapids are, busting up on these rocks, and it's just really a raging river. So it's a land. I don't think it's gonna have a type. I'm not gonna give it like island. It's just gonna be just a land that taps for a blue. And it's going to... It might be a shit land. I've never heard of it. So it's going to enter the battlefield tapped. It's going to enter the battlefield tapped, and it's going to tap for a blue mana, but it also has another ability that says tap, pay 2 and a blue, tap, target creature your opponent's control. And the flavor text is going to read, whoosh, 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 splash, splash, water, water, splash. Quote, Raging River. All right, y'all. Was I close?
I'm going to be nice and say
that's
no.
A no.
No, that's a no. It's a hard no.
It's not a land. Dang it. I was really feeling it. I was trying to make a soul read.
Damn. Now I'm going to expand what we bring to these. So Raging River is a red enchantment for 2 red pips.
It's red? It's a river.
It's a
That's
red
water.
Raging. It's raging. It's a raging river.
What? There's no way that this is a red
Dude,
card.
it's so red. It's so red because it came from Alpha. It's that old.
Oh, really? It's that old. Damn.
It is old. So it reads, do you want the errated or do you want the original? OG.
No,
okay.
OG.
When you attack, non-flying defending creatures must be divided as opponent wishes between the left and right sides of the river. You then choose on which side of the river to place each attacking creature, and attacking creatures can only be blocked by flying creatures or those on the same side of the river.
Yeah, a classic bullshit alpha card that does weird stuff. Love it. Is there any flavor text?
No,
And what's the artwork
because it's
like?
so wordy. And so it looks like you're in a canyon, right? And all of this water is funneling these logs towards the end of this canyon.
Is the water blue or is it red
is blue.
with the blood of your enemies? Damn. Okay. Yeah, I would have only been accepting of this card is if the water was red. The fact that it's blue and is a red card, it really tilts me.
It is not a cheap card either. I mean, nobody's going to be playing this card, but it's just because it's from Alpha. It is, yeah. It's just one of those cards. Thank you, Doug's ad for this card.
I'm seeing it now. Yeah.
It's a card. This is definitely a magic card.
Unfortunately, a red card. I hate it. Not a fan. Anti-Raging River.
Is this the
podcast.
worst card? This is the one you like. This is the one that creates the most.
Yeah, it really tilts me to, and correct me if I'm wrong, people, but when I'm thinking of a Raging River, the only other pie break besides a blue card that I would accept is green, right? Like if it were like a really powerful river going through a forest, like they're trying that with Raging River here, where they're going through this like mountainous canyon type of thing, but like it's really not. So yeah, 0 out of 10 card.
I kind of liked it only because it reminded me of a water park that is local to this area. Like, I mean, it is kind of like an hour
Raging
away.
Waters?
Raging Waters, yeah.
There we go.
That's what it reminded me of.
I think I went there once as a child.
Yeah.
This is not free promo, by the way. We will not say whether or not we like or dislike the place.
Yeah. I'm just saying it reminded me of that place.
Anyway. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode on Mirrormade. And thanks, Sean, aka Manila Midget, for recommending this card. Please direct your attention down below to the links to our link tree, where you'll find everywhere we host our podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, as well as links to our Discord, our wonderful, wonderful Discord community, where we play CEDH games, talk CEDH, talk about the episodes that we released. Just please join. It's absolutely free to do so. Just hop in the Discord and say hello. Also, there's a link to our Patreon, which we've mentioned multiple times in this episode, so we won't get into it more. But if you're interested in joining and supporting us and making everything that we do a lot easier, hop in the Patreon today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week for our 1-year anniversary episode.
Thank you.
Bye.